Hello, my name is Jenny Sjöholm. I'm a conservation specialist and senior lecturer in urban design and conservation. Now I will give a brief introduction to the concepts of heritage and heritization. So, to start off, what is cultural heritage? Well, it can be defined in many different ways. One way to look on it is that it is a series of practices, places, objects, built environments, etc. that is important to a community or to a group of people, and that is passed on from one generation to the next. A key in a cultural heritage is that it has some kind of cultural significance. And cultural significance can be a variety of different things and aspects. It can mean that it has aesthetic, historic, scientific, social or spiritual values for past, present or future generations. Another aspect is that cultural significance is somehow embodied in the place in itself. It can be in the fabric, in the setting, in the overall context, how the place is being used, and also different associations and values connected to the site. What is important to realize is also that places can have a range of different values connected to it, and different groups of people or different individuals can attach different heritage values to the place. So, talking about heritage values, what can that be? Well, it can in turn be defined and discussed in different terms and using different kind of typologies of values, let's say. Two different ways you can differentiate between it is between socio-cultural values and economic values, which is different ways to describe what is basically the same thing. And socio-cultural values, that can be historical values, it can be cultural or symbolic values, social values, spiritual or even religious values, or aesthetic values connected to a place or to a built environment or to different objects. Economic values, it's a different way to describe these heritage values, either by a market value, that is to say that something is having a certain kind of economic value based on its significance. But it can also be calculated non-market values, that is to say what is worth to just have the cultural heritage within your town or within your neighborhood, even if it's not something you profit from or not something you even necessarily use on an every basis. Yes, the knowledge of having it is significant to the way of life and to the image and the identity of your town and your place. So, how does heritage, cultural heritage, built heritage relate to the past and to history? It is similarities between them, but they are conceptually different things. To start off with, the past, it can be defined as everything that has ever happened. History, in turn, it can be defined as a selective attempt to describe what has been happening in the past. And that is different interpretations. You want to maybe focus on different aspects, highlight certain parts of the past, and that is how you write history. Whereas heritage, in turn, that is always formed in the present and negotiations here and now. It can be defined as a contemporary product shaped from history, but it is not history in itself, but rather different needs and demands in the present of how to use and relate back to history and to what has happened in the past. And this way of conceptualizing cultural heritage means that it is not static artifacts or buildings or places as such. It's more thinking about heritage as a process. And that process can be called heritagization. And the process can be defined as how objects, places and practices are turned into cultural heritage. That is to say, it's not just mere a set of buildings or artifacts, but it's something that is thought about and perceived as being of cultural significance and being an important part of the cultural heritage. And the heritization processes, they can have different dimensions to it. If you have already a selection set of cultural heritage you have somehow designated as being significant, sometimes there are reasons where you need to reassess this and reevaluate and see if is it still relevant in society, because of, well, different things happen over time that causes renegotiations of these values. And in this process you can have new cultural heritage added to the already existing bulk of heritage that is designated. What is already designated heritage can also be reaffirmed as being significant cultural heritage or reinterpreted, meaning that it's still significant as cultural heritage, but maybe for slightly different reasons than was obvious when they first were selected and designated. And sometimes when you have already designated heritage, it is also sometimes being dismissed as being heritage and taken away from the heritage context, let's say. And talking in the terms of heritization, that means that you can have re-heritization processes. And that is when cultural heritage is being confirmed and reinforced as being cultural heritage. And also the opposite, de-heritization processes, where cultural heritage is dismissed and eventually being delisted as cultural heritage.